But in a situation where you find that they must look at the situation,
not necessarily tribal or regional.
but I have said that.
All right, thank you for staying with us. It's Daybreak on Trust TV. Time for us to take a look at the dailies on Daybreak. We have Emmanuel Osemeka. He is a public affairs analyst to review some of the stories with us here in the studio. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good morning, and thank you for having me.
Yeah. All right, so let's begin with the Daily Trust newspaper this morning. The lead story here says, Naira crisis. It says queues for cash persist. Customers bribe bank officials. The writer says banks pay old notes in Kano, Abuja, and Ibadan. Customers decry poor electronic services. You'll find all the details on page 4 when you pick the Daily Trust newspaper. Now, also you find above the lead story, many killed in Benue farmers herders clashes, and that's on page 6. IGP puts CPs on alert for post-election crisis. That's on page 26. Dogwa granted 500 million naira bail barred from Kano governorship poll, and that's on page 5. Above, well, the pictorial there shows you the presidential candidate of the People's Democratic Party, Atiku Abubakar, alongside other leaders of the PDP who went on a protest yesterday to INEC office. It says presidential poll, Atiku Tambua lead PDP's protest to INEC. The footnote, you'd find LG to spend 869 billion naira on 2023 census, says minister on page 19. 10 family members returning from wedding die in auto crash on page 8. And then you have also 10th NAS race for leadership hot up on page 7. So these are the main stories on the Daily Trust newspaper this morning.
Now let's take a look at the Blueprint newspaper. It has a lead story that says, Presidency, you're paying for ignoring G5's warning, Wike tells Atiku. And we have a writer that says, ex-VP Tambuwa lead protest to INEC, demand fresh election. The next writer, retire from politics honorably, Tinubu campaign council tells ex-vice president. Then the third writer describes PDP's protest as a new low. And beneath the pictorial there we have polls. Police to arrest 203 in 185 incidents, recovered 18 arms. And beneath that, Ohaneze counters fifth columnist, insists Obi won presidential polls. Sit at home, 1 killed, 2 buses, 5 tricycles set ablaze in Enugu. We also have alleged murder, Reps Majority Leader Dogwa gets bail. Still on the Blueprint, INEC to appeal court allows reconfigure beavers for Saturday polls. 6 variation of inspection over Atiku Obi's restraining order. We also have Supreme Court affirms Dauda Lawal as Zamfara PDP Guba candidate, and we have committed 291 billion to the 2023 census. This is from the federal government. Beneath that, 10th NAS, North Central APC stakeholders jostle for speaker. These are the major stories on the Blueprint newspaper for today.
All right, now on the Nation newspaper, we have the lead story that talks about Naira's scarcity lingers despite Supreme Court judgment. You also have no cash at banking hall, ATM points. You see banks await CBN's directive on old notes. INEC to reconfigure beavers for governorship assembly elections. CBN tackles IMF's claim on Anchor borrowers loan. 98 senators elect, 325 reps elect to get COR, that's certificate of return, today. Also, APC, PDP clash over presidential poll results. Olanipekun, 49 others to defend Tinubu's mandate. So these are the main stories on the Nation today.
Over now to the Guardian newspaper, which has a lead story that says, Atiku leads supporters to INEC, threatens daily protests. And the first rider, INEC owes allegiance to Nigerians, not any political party, says Okoye. Retire from politics, go to Dubai, stop embarrassing yourself, Tinubu tells Atiku. And beneath the pictorial there, we have diphtheria kills 61,783 others. Kills 61 persons, 783 others hospitalized in Kano. And we have waiting game as lawyers argue CBN's compliance with Supreme Court verdict. And just beneath the masthead, we have imperative to prosecute election offenders and violators. Then we also have uncertainty over next election as INEC seeks to reconfigure beavers. Senate presidency, APC tips southeast. And we have lawyer demands income expenditure details of INEC on electoral process. These are the major stories on The Guardian for today.
And on the Nation newspaper, the lead story talks about Supreme Court order on old notes. It says, banks in partial compliance begins skeletal recirculation. A few banks pay old 500, 1,000 naira on Monday. Others await directives as Emefiele keeps mum. You have also most ATMs remain dry. Skeptical bank customers, traders reject old notes from banks. You also would find INEC challenges Atiku Obi's suit on beavers. Don't handle education like Buhari, ASU tells Tinubu. Government seeks 327 billion naira donor funding for census. Atiku vows to extend protest, demands result cancellation. You also have other stories there. Whitney, Chrisland seeks autopsy review. Inquest begins April 4th. 50 feared killed as suspected herdsmen invade Benue communities. 203 hoodlums arrested during presidential poll, says the police. You also would find on Saturday, March 11. Well, that's a promo. So these are the main stories on the Punch newspaper this morning.
Now let's take a look at this day newspaper. It has a lead story that says, INEC's application to court to reconfigure beavers raising integrity questions. And the first rider says, Commission harps on need to reset devices before their deployment for governorship, state houses of assembly polls. And beneath that, we have the pictorial of the black uniform protest which was led by the presidential candidate of the People's Democratic Party, Atiku Abubakar. And above that, we have PDP. Ample evidence shows INEC's deliberate complicity to rig presidential election. Says Commission to Save Nigerians knowingly deactivated beavers. APC dismisses opposition parties' protest. And just above the masthead, we have Toye Co pledges to create 230,000 jobs in first 100 days in office. And we also have banks resume issuance of old 500 naira, 1,000 naira notes to customers. These are the major stories on this day newspaper for today.
All right, now we'll take a look at perspectives to this analysis. Like we told you, we have Emmanuel Osemeka. Thank you again for joining us on Daybreak.
It's my pleasure.
Quite a lot of issues that have lingered till this moment, specifically the issue of the cash crunch. Now we are seeing court judgments, and then we are kind of not even sure what exactly is happening. While in one breath, we hear that banks have started dispensing the cash. In another breath, we hear that some banks are awaiting, the directives from the Central Bank of Nigeria. So how does this all go for us?
Well, it's very unfortunate that we are at this, should I call it crossroad? I think the major challenge is with the fact that those who took the federal government to the Supreme Court, citing conflict between the state and the federal government as the parameter for that case on the issue of monetary policy. They clearly knew what they were doing, because this was a purely political issue, and they know clearly that if they had joined the central bank, that case would have died immediately. But they were clever by half, by just suing the federal government with the hope of creating conflict between the federal and of course the state government, so that the Supreme Court can assume jurisdiction. However, Supreme Court has given its judgment, and one of the reasons why I feel that it's a bit, the federal government is a bit slack in issuing the directive to CBN, and of course CBN by extension. If you heard the Attorney General when he was asked, he said he's not competent to advise the federal government on monetary policy. So that's why you have this kind of quagmire, and CBN will tell you that there is no direct directive from the Supreme Court to them. But I know that over time they will get over it, and of course that law, that judgment will be obeyed. But the reality is that everybody knows clearly that on issues of monetary policy, it rests squarely with the CBN.
Well, for how long will Nigerians have to wait really for this? Because, I mean, Nigerians, for many people, they don't have access to the old notes.
Absolutely.
They don't have access to the new notes.
Yes.
And this has continued to linger.
Also on businesses.
You think about the impact of this on businesses and the lives of people generally. That's a huge problem. And, you know, what really should people be doing?
Well, I mean, there's nothing anybody can do. This now rests squarely, on the table of the president, because the directive has been given to the federal government and the federal government and its agencies. But of course, that's like a vague, pronouncement. So, but of course, it's the president that has to direct the central bank to begin to issue out the old 500 and 1,000.
All right, Mr. Emeka, why we're waiting for that? This lead story on the Daily Trust says,
yes,
queues for cash persist, customers bribe bank officials. For some customers to even gain access into the banks now, they have to bribe, because they are not able to go.
Yes.
And before you answer, I'd like you to take it side by side. Bank must, the editorial of the Daily Trust today, which is banks must address poor digital services. Now, some persons in this story that went to the bank that were unable to go to, and they had to bribe, they went because they had made internet transactions which were either declined or bounced back, or So why this is happening? Banks have shut their doors to customers. Then customers cannot operate internet services easily. So how do we get out of all of this?
So, the last time we talked about this here, I clearly, talked about why that banks has to invest, in the infrastructure if this cashless policy must work, seamlessly. Because you cannot go into cashless policy with this epileptic or even non-existing infrastructure. And we discussed then, and I clearly stated that the banks were really not ready for this massive 100% cashless policy. However, the information I have, like for myself, I also have the same challenge. I have a lot of transactions that declined, and I'm waiting for reversal. So I have to, if I get to the bank, if you don't know anybody in the bank, they won't even open the door for you, because banks are scared that people are going to come destroy their properties and all that. But what I understood clearly is that, like for a particular bank, I understood that for a whole week, they were only giving 300,000 naira to give to customers. Banks 300,000 is something one person goes to withdraw. Then you give a particular branch 300,000. That's, to what do you expect that bank to do? So sometimes also is to clearly understand where the problem is. The CBN is not issuing out money as it is today. And I recall that I clearly stated that one of the major reasons why there's this deliberate crunch is because of the elections. And it's been proven over time. If you look at the parameters for for the votes that happened in 2025, money was around number 7. So yes, there were vote buying.
But
It wasn't pronounced.
now that the presidential and national assembly elections are over, one would think that
You still have a major election.
No,
coming up.
but why maybe they are waiting for a directive or something?
Yes.
The banks were not just there for withdrawals.
Yes.
So why wouldn't they look for a way around it so that people who have genuine concerns, the genuine problems, can actually come and make their complaints and then be attended to? Because as it is, people that have problems, that it's not like they're coming to the banks to withdraw money. They can't even get that service.
Get solutions to
their problems at this point.
But I mean, basically, you know that when we have very weak regulators in the country, one of the major challenges of CBN over the years is the fact that they have actually been very weak in their regulatory responsibilities. And some of the challenges we've seen with the banks, the deposit money banks, is the fact that the CBN hasn't really done their job properly. Because if CBN did their job properly, the monies they released to the bank initially was enough to circulate. But unfortunately, the banks began to sell the monies to politicians, and as a result, the politicians mopped up all the cash.
Emmanuel,
Yes.
We have another issue here. Regardless of the court orders that we've seen that somehow the old notes seem to have lost street acceptability.
Absolutely.
Do you see this as a problem? I mean, going forward?
Of course.
Because like right now, even with the court order, it seems like a big risk for people to go to the bank, get the old cash, and then when you hit the streets, you are not sure who will take the cash from you.
So the reality is that I know people who have the old notes, a few of the old notes, and they go to the market to buy, and the market people say they will not take it. What will happen over time is the fact that the moment the president gives the directive to the CBN, just the way he gave the directive on the 209 old notes, once he gives that directive, that legitimacy will return. Why? Everybody knows clearly that when it comes to issue of monetary policy, it rests squarely with the CBN. You cannot legislate monetary policy. Monetary policy is an economic issue, and there are agencies of government vested with that responsibilities. And that is why you see that it looks as if the Supreme Court judgment was a bit of, people took it with a pinch of salt. Yes, it's a Supreme Court. After Supreme Court, you appeal to God. But the reality is that somebody has to execute that judgment. And who is the person to execute the judgment? The executive arm of government.
Emmanuel, I'll still take you back to the problem with the internet services.
Yes.
When this cashless policy was announced, it came with a lot of merits.
Absolutely.
It was going to tackle corruption and vote buying and even banditry and all of that. But for it to be effective, the banks needed to be on board.
Right.
Now we're hearing that the banks did not have the capacity. Didn't they know that this was coming, and didn't they know that there was going to be, traffic, and why were they not prepared for it?
Well, we can't divorce the banks, we can't divorce the CBN, we cannot divorce the telecom companies. So they are all interwoven. Like I keep, repeating, the banks have a responsibility. They are there for business. They are business people who deal with financial activities. And as a result, they ought to have known, because we had more than 3 months before this kicked in. By then, they ought to have increased their bandwidth or what have you, to be able to accommodate the influx of, online or e-transactions that will take place. But unfortunately, they didn't do that. Today, you talk to the bank, they will tell you, oh, it's a network issue. You go to the network, they ask the network providers, they will tell you, no, it's not our problem. So it all boils down to regulatory framework. Because if there is consequences for wrongdoing, if there is consequences for dropping the ball, definitely you will see things work. And that is also what happened to this our electoral issues. I mean, the issue till tomorrow, INEC is here to even explain to you and I why IREV, where we spent billions, hundreds of billions on, didn't work.
So talking about that, the electoral issues, we also have other stories here, and one of them is the fact that the Independent National Electoral Commission is requesting to be allowed to reconfigure the beavers ahead of the governorship elections, and that's certainly not something that the opposition is taking lightly. There's been, in fact, protests, as a matter of fact. And the PDP, to be specific, says that they will continue to protest. So the dust is yet to settle as far as the presidential and National Assembly election are concerned. And we are looking to go to the polls again for the governorship and state assembly. What do you make of this?
I actually feel that there is every possibility, there's every likelihood that the March 11 election will be shifted.
Mm-hmm. Why do you say that?
Because, for example, there is already a judgment, restricting INEC from tampering with the materials used for the presidential election. And it's not just one judgment, it's judgment that is in two parts for the two opposing political parties who are laying claims. One is saying cancel, and we have evidence that you should cancel. The other one is saying, I won the election and I will prove it to you. Now, if you take a look at the case between APC versus INEC and Adeleke in Osun State election, you will see clearly that judgment came as a result of beavers, as a result of findings from the beavers. Now, if INEC, for any reason, gets that judgment, which I don't see them getting, because they're going to the Court of Appeal to say, can you reverse yourself on the order you've given? Because we need these beavers for this election. So the question now is, the order we gave, have you complied with it in the first place? The evidence that is attached to the beavers, where do you intend to keep it? How do you intend that the applicants will get access to those materials or those data? What is the plan? We are yet to see that. Probably INEC has better explanation to give on that. But if they do not have that, as if they do not have an alternative, probably they've copied it out or what have you and all that, they will not be able to get this.
Because I was going to ask that INEC, I'm sure INEC knows the importance of the beavers.
Definitely.
I mean, the beavers showed in Osun that there was overvoting, at least at the tribunal level. And so if INEC at this point is asking to reconfigure, don't you think that maybe it has taken out that information, that maybe taken out the necessary information from the presidential election, so that maybe what he wants is a clean slate for the governorship? Don't you think?
Well, you see, this whole thing, the case in court, and the judiciary will tell us precisely what to do. One of the things you must understand is that the Osun case is a bit confusing, because when APC applied to INEC to get the information from the beavers, it was downloaded and given to them, howbeit incomplete. And subject to that, they went to court and filed their case. PDP went to INEC and applied for same. It was given to them. Completely, what was given to them is not the same as what was given to APC, howbeit still incomplete. Now, when the two of them presented the information they got from INEC that's downloaded from the beavers, both information was not correct. And based on that report, because the two reports came from INEC, they decided to look at the beavers. And when they look at the beavers versus what was given, that's when they came to that conclusion of overvoting. Now, when they get to Court of Appeal, we will see how it pans out eventually. Now, if you follow the trend of that case, you will see that tampering with the beavers is going to be a very big problem. So I believe strongly that most likely, this election might be shifted by either a week or two to enable them, come up with a more plausible. Don't forget that if you go to the IREV as we speak today, it's yet to completely upload all the results. And you can see that results are being uploaded, some results have still been taken out and all that. So there's a whole lot of things going on that needs to first of all be taken care of, if we must find justice. But if INEC have, like you tried to postulate, have already cleaned out the beavers, well, that's a different challenge.
Because except they'll have another set of beavers to now use for the governorship.
Most likely that might be the other option. After all, we saw some that was got removed from certain houses, but we're yet to get the full details.
Okay, well, we'll see how that plays out. Also, the protest yesterday by the PDP, a lot of people are saying, well, why protest the INEC? To what end would you be protesting to INEC? After all, INEC is the one that made the announcement and announced the final results, and it clearly told you to go to the court if you are aggrieved. So why take your protest to them?
So I think the PDP's protest is in, from what I understand, I gathered, is in twofolds. If you recall, during the coalition, the PDP agent reminded INEC chairman, who is the chief returning officer, that according to the 2022 Electoral Act, that agents are, so if the agents have an objection regarding the collation, that the chairman had, the right by law to take a look at that complaint. And he said, the INEC chairman, I quote him, said, let's complete the process, then we will review. I don't know if you recall. The agent insisted, and it was as if each and every one of them, every agent of the political party, seemed to have agreed with the PDP agent at the time. But the INEC chairman insisted that let the process, let's finish the collation, then we can review.
I also recall a scenario where someone suggested from among the party agents that kind of reminding INEC that it has the powers to review the concerns going by the new Electoral Act. And in response, the chairman said, well, I like the idea, the suggestion that we could review that. So I remember.
And remember, the law says they have 7 days to review. Unfortunately, the moment the collation was completed, the INEC chairman announced a winner. And the moment that winner was announced, INEC had no powers anymore. INEC had transferred that power to the tribunal. But if he had gone back to take a look at what those complaints were, they may have made some corrections where necessary. For example, if we look at the reports from the civil society and the African Union and the EU, the results they got from the people unit, and of course, now corroborated by the beavers. If you take a look at the reverse result, the reverse result on the IREV is in tandem with the results that the civil society group talked about, and it's completely different from what INEC collated and announced.
All right, but what a lot of people are saying is that once INEC has announced the result, the next step is the court.
Definitely.
Because, and then there were some people on social media were saying yesterday that if care is not taken, as you know, in this country, some people could hijack this kind of protest, and it could escalate into something else.
Well, I think this is where most of us get it wrong. Protest is a right. You can't take it away from anybody. It is your constitutional right to protest, but it has to be peaceful. It has to be within the ambit of the law. The law even, mandates the police, the security agencies, to provide security for every genuine protest. So that's the truth. So that's why PDP is protesting. They are protesting the fact that if you are, as an umpire, as a fair and transparent umpire, you have to be fair to everybody. If we had a complaint that is allowed by law, and you are mandated by law to take a look at that complaint before announcing, why bypass that law, and why fool us that you would do it and ended up not doing? That's the reason for the protest.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your perspectives. Quite a lot of issues really to chew. Stories on 203 hoodlums arrested by the police from the elections that we've seen. Quite an interesting story. I would have loved for you to touch on that, but we couldn't.
Time is never our friend.
Yeah, we can proceed with that. Well, thank you so much. We look forward to having you again on the show.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, we'll take a short break now, and then when we return, Daybreak will continue on top of the hour. Join us again.
But in a situation where you find that a person look at the same
not necessarily tribal or regional.
But I have said that